M. The Media Project. E for All and E para Todos are focused on entrepreneurs who are building our cities and towns one neighborhood at a time. And E for All needs you. Become a mentor, enlist as an entrepreneur, or work to bring an E for All program to your community.
I'm M the Media Project founder, Scott M. Graves, and I'm an E for All mentor. Believe me when I say you already have everything you need to be an entrepreneur. By working with E for All, you will garner the skills, the connections, and the confidence to see your business to success.
Don't think you're ready to be an E for All mentor? Think again. Your business community needs you to step up and contribute in a highly dynamic and meaningful way. Learn more today at eforall.org.
We all hear about the importance of international talent to the U.S. technology sector. We understand how an open set of arms to international trade, travel, and immigration plays a role in our country's success. But our historic relationship to immigration tells a much more complicated story. And with the recent threat of closed borders following the 2024 presidential campaign to come, we wanted to take a closer look at the lived experience of those plying the waters of our current international tech sector to really find an explanation for why an open society is so very important. Our guest represents the human personification, the energy that comes to us and makes our tech sector vibrant and our country great. Davide Dantonio is with us for this podcast. He's a class of 22 Venture for America Fellow, and currently plays program lead on no less than 2 Indiana-based generator accelerators. He's also a podcaster in his own right. We're talking multiculturalism and the lived experience of young entrepreneurs living and working in America. Davide, it's great to have you here this afternoon. How are you doing in Indiana?
Thank you so much, Scott. It's truly a pleasure to be here. And we had past conversations before, and I'm really excited to chat with you and to explore the topics that you mentioned. And thank you again for the kind presentation. I think it's amazing the way you describe everything. So thank you for this.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for being here. Why don't you, before we do anything else, just a few words on how you came to be doing what you're doing for Generator in the heartland of America here in Indiana. And then we'll get a little bit into your thoughts on multiculturalism.
Yeah, sounds great. So, funny story of my life. I was born in Napoli, and I landed in Indianapolis. So I think in the name of this city, on these 2 cities, was kind of written my story. So destiny speaks on its own, and yeah. So basically, I had a journey that led me from Naples to Milan for my studies. So I started my multicultural experience in Italy because already when you move from Naples to Milan, there is a huge culture shock, probably the biggest one I had in my whole life. I had some stories related to it that always...
the big city, the big cosmopolitan and industrial city.
Yes, but also the way people behave with each other. I think it was the biggest shock was from the Southern culture, very open, very warm, very talkative. People likes to connect, likes to interact, to the more reserved, I would call sometimes called the Northern culture and weather. So yeah, that's a huge culture shock. And then after that, everything was kind of in downwards, I don't know if you say in English, downwards effort.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And so basically I went later to China for exchange studies. And then I came back to Europe for pursuing my master studies between Madrid, so Spain, and then London in UK. and I was studying in a French business school that had like multiple locations. So I applied in this school that I mentioned before. And then this French university sent me for a double master's degree in the US, where I really dive deep the whole world of entrepreneurship. I failed in trying to create a little venture project with some peers at university, but I was feeling like the drive of entrepreneurs to try to solve a problem, because problems are painful, and like entrepreneurs have the drive and the mission to try to solve them. And then I decided that I wanted to support entrepreneurs, to feel heard, to have an empathetic ear, to discuss their business and emotional challenges in the roller coaster journey of a founder. And that's why I decided that Indiana, an ecosystem in development, an ecosystem that I feel has high potential, I could have an impact. And so that's why Indianapolis inspired me to take this
in the great
leap.
state of Indiana. Now you come to us by way of a multiplicity of places that are no joke when it does come to technology, when it comes to entrepreneurship. I would argue, I mean, namely, China, and then having spent some time in the UK, in and around London. So why the United States? I'm always interested to ask people, like, this is where you've now decided to make your home for the time being. Like, what was there anything about coming here that was unique and that made you stay here?
That's a very interesting question. So to be very, very honest, when I was in China and in UK, I was studying in the typical business schools, and the focus of business schools is the big corporates, is the consulting, is the banking, is the finance. So they didn't really help me to dive deeper and to see the startup ecosystems and the startup space as a potential avenue for my life. And everything completely changed when I landed in the US, in particular in South Carolina. There is another ecosystem that I'm deeply grateful for, because I had so much knowledge, so much support to really explore who I was and what I was meant to be. And so, like, this whole idea of like having lots of courses and lectures about startups, entrepreneurship, lots of organizations on campus that were like touching this topic. The McNair Institute, managed by one of the most brilliant professor there, like Dr. Dirk Brown, and then like also the connection that they made for me for Venture for America. And so, like, I would say the US probably that's the bottom line. Sorry, probably was a longer journey of words to arrive here. The US put the stress on the fact that startups, the startup life can be the American dream. Like in Europe, in the UK, the startup world is a niche. In the US, like the whole Silicon Valley, Mid-Coast, that's how they find Indianapolis and the Midwest.
Sure.
There's the Mid-Coast and the Silicon Valley dream, and people like made incredible careers out of it. And could be like, or building a startup or supporting the ecosystem. And I think there's lots of more energy, of more drive, and also a lot of more resources that focus on this space.
It's interesting to hear you talk about really what boils down to one approach to business education, right? Which is an older model of an ecosystem versus the entrepreneurial, because there is truly, particularly with any form of high technology, there is truly what's amassed over the last, 40 or 50 years. There's a different subculture, and there's a different way that we create the financial stacks that fuel it. There's a different way to get a business off the ground, right? That kind of also has its own culture, as opposed to traditional forms of finance and heavy industry, sort of commodities and all that kind of stuff, isn't there? But having not gone to school internationally, I feel like in my personal experience, I had a similar thing happen. With in this case, members within a business department that were highly entrepreneurial and that tailored curriculum and networking and experiences for their students around contemporary entrepreneurship versus traditional finance and what have you. So it's interesting that, whether you're doing this domestically or across national borders, there's this greater movement, isn't there? For like the way, the paradigms of how things were done in really I guess in the first and second industrial revolution. And here we are. I won't say deep into the third industrial revolution, but a good 30 years into it, even though we're kicking and screaming, fighting between the second and the third.
Yeah. And if I can add like two other considerations about, like you mentioned, for example, the financial sector. I feel like, for example, in US, there is like the belief that these little realities, like the startups, can really bring a breakthrough innovation at scale in a sector. Like I feel in Europe, there is more tendency to say, okay, like startups can develop cool projects, but the big breakthrough innovations can only be led by big corporations. Like it's a miracle if a startup is impacting a whole sector. Let's say, for example, like the case of OpenAI. Like for me, was shocking that a startup created less than 1 year ago, like had such a massive breakthrough change on the whole world. In the same like couple in another, not industrial revolution, but like internet revolution that was brought by like Bill Gates, by Steve Jobs. Like these guys in a garage are able to change, to put like the first brick to change the whole world. And that's something like pretty disruptive. And there's also like the other point that I would say that I was thinking about. In the US, they put you entrepreneurship as one of like the main paths you can take in your career. Also with all this pop culture, like Gary Vee that says like college, if you think to be a founder, it's not needed, just start your own venture. I think also in the US, there is this pop culture really brings people like to get informed to this world, about this world of entrepreneurship and startup. Instead, like in Europe, it's a hidden path that university doesn't really tell you about. It's something you kind of can see around the bush because maybe some interesting people on LinkedIn have published some news about it.
But that sounds heavily dependent. That world you're describing on, you got to just be lucky enough to have made the right connections or be part of the, you have to be the right tangential sort of relationship in order to accidentally come across it.
Yeah. And the only, probably now I'm only talking about my subject experience. Like for example, in my bubble in London, my bubble in Madrid, my bubble in China, I had not so many connections, as you said, that really opened my eyes in entrepreneurship space. So it's my subjective experience. But something I can be objective about is that, for example, I was in Italy for 20 years of my life, and I was looking at newspapers, I was looking at the national TV, and innovation and technology is really a very, very, very minimal section of all the news and topics. Like, I don't know about the US because I don't really follow like TV in the US, but all this, like there is a lot of emphasis on politics, on small businesses, the typical SMEs, but there is so little mention about founders, startups, innovative ideas and projects that it's conservative. It's pretty, I don't know how there is a word in English that I'm...
Well, it sounds like they're not really emphasizing that as part of, like, as if it's not really news at all.
Yes, backward orient. It's not like forward thinking, is backward thinking. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. What we're here to talk about multiculturalism, and most people, even if they're not immersed in any form of technology sector for their career or interested in technology, they're going to say, oh yeah, I can see how, somebody who's done a lot of traveling or someone who has lived in a number of countries for a meaningful period of time, right? They can understand how the experiences within various cultures are going to make those people more sophisticated or more empathic or more open-minded, etc. But I want you to get more specific, if you can, about, you know, how these experiences that you've had really contribute to the way that in turn you contribute to the technology community here in the States.
Okay. So I would I think your question has two parts. I would say one part is like the open-mindedness. So what are the stereotypes about it, and what really is from a person that lived in multiple countries, from my understanding. That was first point, and then second point, how is it connected to technology impact? So how can multiculturalism impact technology?
Right on.
So
yeah.
on the first side, so the first side is like a pretty easy answer. The second one is more complex and nuanced. So for me, multiculturalism, and that for me it's difficult to define this word. But for me, a person is multicultural is a person that is open to the unknown. In a sense, before I spent like 1 year in the US, I didn't know anything about US culture. Before spending 4 months in China, I didn't know anything about the Chinese culture. And even now that I lived 1 year in the US and 4 months in China, I don't know a lot about these cultures, and I cannot say that I know them. And the main point is that I don't want to make any assumption. So for me, being open-minded and having seen a lot, really more I know, more I'm aware to make less assumptions. So I don't need to take anything for granted. I'm surprised, and I let myself be surprised every day to observe behaviors that I don't really understand the reason behind them. And every day I understand a little piece more of the puzzle that compose a culture. And like it's really not do something because you assume that like in your own culture this thing is done the same way, but always ask first, seek consent before doing something that may have an impact, may be meaningful. And so like I would say observe a lot, listen a lot, don't come in a place with some assumptions about who they are and how they behave and how they think. And I can give a quick example of all these abstract things I'm saying.
Oh, please do, because it sounds like the first lesson is, just this idea of like, know what you don't know.
Yeah.
like which is just like a good fundamental of life, let alone just career. It's
and the problem is that, like, for example, I mean, I don't want to throw a rock towards the people that probably I love the most, but let's say my parents, right? Luckily, they cannot understand English, so I can say anything, and they will never really like.
Secret safe with us here at the Are We Here Yet podcast.
Yeah. But basically, when I talk about them, I say, "Hey, mother, father, I'm gonna, I want to like, I'm doing yoga every day." They say like, "Why do you do yoga? Like, isn't that boring? Like, are you sure it's helpful for like your physical exercise? Because you're only doing yoga like as a sport activity, and it sounds like very meditative, very like not dynamic, and like you don't know what they're talking about." Or for example, I was telling them, "Hey, mother, as you're stressful, I really suggest you to breathe, make some box breathing meditation and some mindful exercises." And says like, "No, it's something that doesn't really matter. I have my problems. Please don't bother me with these like useless tools." Okay, but you never tried them. You never experimented them. Like you only see them in movies. Like why don't you take the leap of faith to try them? And the same, like I can say, for example, like in the US, lots of people are going around with the one wheel, with the electric unicycles, with the scooters. And like scooters are starting to become like something common in Europe. But for example, like mono wheels and one wheel are completely something that in Europe you don't really see. And when I say to my parents, "Hey, I bought like a mono wheel," they said, "It's not safe. It's crazy. You're gonna fall. You're gonna destroy yourself." Say like in the US, like some people like to do it, and they just do it and they're fun. And there's a lot of preconceptions, lots of assumptions, And I think you should just like look around, see what you like, and just try to get yourself in this world. For example, myself in the yoga world, or I like a lot to dance now, like social Latino dance, Latino social dancing, salsa,
Yes.
bachata. And I didn't know anything. Like now, I just start to count the songs in 8 times. And yeah, I mean, I know that I don't know, and I'm just trying to be here and like look around and see what I can learn.
And doesn't this become more and more important? As an example, with so much here in the West, we might call them emerging markets. I'll apologize to people who live in places that the West is designating as emerging markets. But the simple fact of the matter is, the market is dramatically changing across different parts of the continent of Africa, South America. In other words, there are more people, particularly with different forms of technology, and that marketplace that are open to doing business across national borders. And so it only becomes more important that we can really, really, really empathize with people from across a wide spectrum of cultural backgrounds and nationalities to understand how we can do business together, because we have the capacity now to do business together and have it be truly reciprocal. It's not just, the first world selling to the third world, right? As an example of an old paradigm, but that there's going to be a lot of reciprocity moving forward of various goods and services across these boundaries. I feel like, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I feel like there's actually it's increasingly a requirement that we can find the commonality with each other.
Yeah, I agree. I was just discussing today kind of where you're from and your target markets. So for example, I mean, sometimes it's true. Like you have a startup I have a startup in Colombia, and they are mainly serving like LATAM people that don't have a credit score, and so they are helping with their credit card to help like them to build a credit score and to get a first credit card. And for example, like I was discussing with this founder that potentially he could also expand in the US, because a lot of people in the US, they didn't really have access to like they didn't have the chance to build a reputability, a credit worthiness with the traditional institutions. So maybe they can offer to the US population a second chance to get a credit card and rebuild their credit score, because maybe these people are in different moment of their lives and they're more ready financially to handle a credit card. And so that's like kind of that's how you can keep open-mindedness. But an example of you mentioned like how the first world is serving the third world, and of course, like let's say just internet and AI, ChatGPT, like they all came from US, and I'm pretty sure like these tools, if they're really if they are able to be used by like founders, entrepreneurs, and workers in countries in development, potentially these are tools that can create a common play field. Because I mean, internet created a common play field. AI is creating a huge play field, because now, like some education that you could only get in the universities, now you can get it by just chatting with ChatGPT. Like now, I'm learning.
Well, it brings to mind, and I this is an example of the positive and effective use of AI. The concept of the bionic worker, right? It totally levels the playing field, because if it's being leveraged correctly, it doesn't make the human being any less valuable, but it eliminates a lot of grunt intellectual work that is required to be done. The AI bot can now take care of that. And it's not prejudiced for certain languages, certain ethnic backgrounds, et cetera, right? And it completely levels the playing field in that way for work that requires a lot of number crunching. It aggregates that data for you and really leverages everybody into being, as some people would term, the bionic worker.
And last example that shows exactly how being open-minded really makes you see the potential on things. When I arrived to Indiana, I didn't know anything about startups. I was very new to the field. I had a startup of a founder that, I mean, now know him. He's an amazing person, but I didn't know him. And he came from Mexico to Indiana to do a startup regarding translations of documents. And AI was already spread out. There are some tools that are great, like DeepL, DEEPL, that is a great tool for AI translations. And now ChatGPT, like you can translate easily everything. And I was thinking, okay, like why a startup that translates document, there is a marketplace for translating document, is needed right now? Why some people are investing in this startup? And the answer was openness and multiculturalism, because in the US, there is a huge market of people that are Spanish speakers and are from other nationalities like Arabs and like Chinese, Indians, like all possible nationalities.
Yeah.
And they need, especially businesses, they need accurate translations and they need a human being to check these translations and to add human touch to these translations. And at least right now, maybe like in 10 years, 15 years, AI, maybe even more, like not so far in the future, but maybe even more, how to say,
Shorter term, yeah.
shorter term, AI is going to provide the solutions. But like as of now, people that were multicultural and open-minded could see the potential of this startup. And now this startup is like growing revenue, growing attractions, getting even more investments. Because at the end, US is like so multifaceted in terms of cultures. And so these culture-specific solutions are so needed for a population that, because of the different cultures, of the melting pot of cultures, need culture-specific services.
Yeah, it almost goes without saying you can find your market within our borders, right? Because of that, because this continent is a place really where people from virtually all walks of life have come to and created something new. It's no secret, right? I referenced in our introduction today, the United States has had a nuanced, to say the least, history with immigration to this continent. And there's some talk right now, as we are in a presidential campaign season in the United States, of what the future could hold depending on who wins. The Republicans, in this case, running, assuming, that Donald Trump being in the lead, some of his would-be administration members of his administration have come out and said, immigration is going to look a lot more like it did in the Trump first term, a lot more restrictions, both in terms of at the border, but then also some longer term solutions to restrict immigration. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and what it could do. I'm particularly looking for, what you think it would do for the startup communities here, what it would do for the economy too, as well.
Yeah. So maybe it's worth to take a step back and describe how the situation looks right now.
Please do.
So basically, I talk mainly for working visa, for startup related visas, but especially, let's say for employees, because of course, like the founders are like a very rare species, and especially like successful founders are very rare species. So let's 1 second take them out from the game. Like there are every year, like thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers trying to land in the US. And so it happens that each year the government gives between 60 and 80,000 visas, specialty workers, specialty occupation visa holders. And so, of course, if in 1 year there are 200,000 applications, 300,000 applications of workers that wants to come to work in the US, and the US government only gives 60,000, 80,000 visas, then what happens? The government is forced to do a lottery, is forced. The government is doing a lottery.
Yeah, right.
Extract out of like these 200,000, 300,000, the 80,000 lucky people that are gonna work in the US. And let me throw a joke here. Like I see lots of excitement in the US in parties when there are raffles. like each part in the US ends up with a raffle where like you extract the prizes and
Everybody likes a game, right? Except this
Yeah.
is not a game to be played.
yeah, yeah. So the US like plays like the tech workers in the US are allowed to be here thanks to raffles. So in my specific case, it's slightly different because I studied in the US. So once you finish studying, university based on your degree allows you either to stay 1 year or to stay 3 years in the US. So the university is the sponsor of your visa for either 1 or 3 years. But then after this time, there should be an employer taking on your visa. But then if the employer decides, okay, Davide, I think I like you, I would like to keep you in the US, then the employer needs to participate to the lottery, to the raffle. So once university steps out, after 3 years max, the university needs to step out, and an employer needs to play a lottery to retain me. That's how it works, and seems, I don't know, crazy fun because US culture likes raffles. I don't know, but you're playing with lives, and just to add like another factual data, in July 16th, 2023, H1B specialty occupation visa holders, so basically all these lucky people that found that were able to be extracted by the lottery can apply to come to Canada for the simple reason that if in the US you have this occupation visa, this working visa, and you lose a job, in 60 days you need to leave the country. So once they fire you, even if it's a layoff, it's a massive layoff, in 60 days or you find another job or you need to leave the country. And so Canada offers that you can apply, you can transfer your US visa to Canada. So in case you get laid off, you have the option to move to Canada instead of coming back to your country. And of course, some people where their country situation is a bit like dramatic, let's say countries with a not ideal economic situation or countries with particular like religion or political situations.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a great option for them. And in one day, I think Canada put like 10,000 spots for this kind of program. And in one day they were exhausted, and now they were not exhausted. They were like completely occupied by all these workers willing to take this chance on Canada. Because they see the value in case like they lose the job, that they can easily transfer to Canada. Because US doesn't guarantee safety even for people that were lucky to win the lottery.
It seems to me that creating a landscape in which people can stabilize their personal situation and remain in place where they find value personally being here, and in turn we the country are finding value in them being here by them participating in our economy. And I would extend this, by the way, not just to our tech sector friends like you and I are focused on in our conversation, but really to any and all people willing to come to the United States. I've had the honor of employing a multiplicity of people from a variety of countries, both contractors and employees in the trades, right? Building houses and commercial real estate, and working on investments together in residential and commercial real estate, and like thinking about just like what that experience would be like without people from virtually every corner of the world and working together. And just the struggles that people in the first place have getting to the United States, and then they come here and they can thrive. Like whether it's working class work or tech sector, professional class work, etc. I just feel like, we want you here. You know what I'm saying? Like it's what makes this continent. It's what makes the economy here traditionally speaking a powerhouse. To me, it's partially the amalgamation of all these people and their lived experiences coming to this one special place, right? And then working together. Something very unique and something very energetic comes out of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like it's shocking how like it's a very controversial and the coin has two sides. On the one end, that's the country where cultures mix in a very amalgamous way. Probably it's an Italian word I'm trying to translate in English. It's basically it's a well done smoothie. Like you mix bananas, strawberries, apples. Maybe apples are not really a fruit that you would put in a smoothie, but I would say all these ingredients, all these cultures are well blended. Let's ever. I mean, I can talk about Italy because I know it more than any other country I've lived into, but probably I can also mention the example of China. I feel pretty comfortable, like in like because that's a pretty also very clear scenario. Like there, you have the main race that is, let's say, Italians or Chinese, and then there is someone else.
Sure. A
Instead
predominant
here,
minority group, right?
yes, there is like the majority group, and then some other people that for sure are foreigners. When arriving in the US, and I don't know like in which exact terms I can describe that, but I'm very interested about multiculturalism. I'm very interested about if a person like has let's say Asian traits. I've been to China. I love to learn more about their stories, and or if I see a person like that colors, or it's clear that like they have a different ethnicity. I love to learn more about them, and it's crazy because in the US, you really cannot assume, and it's actually very offensive if you assume that someone is not from US. Like if like
I think I'm getting your flavor. I've had friends before, particularly if your ethnicity involves much different physical traits from
yes,
Eurocentric physical traits, and you see, and you go to somebody who's was born and raised here. I'll help you out with this, and then you tell me, if I'm wrong.
yeah,
That's been born and raised here. They're Chinese Americans, but they're Americans. They were simply this is their culture. They don't speak with a Chinese accent. And people would assume like, have you recently arrived? And it's like, man, my family's been here for 4 generations. Your family hasn't even been here for 4 generations. Is that what you're alluding to?
yeah. And when I like, for example, I was in New York with a friend that she knows me since I was like a deeply Italian only person. Now I feel like a bit more cosmopolitan, but she was like when I came to US again, like she brought me around New York, and yeah, I mean, I was curious, like I was wondering, like, okay, I was telling her, like, okay, I'm wondering, like, where this person that looks like Asian, where she comes from. She's like, no, you should not say so because she's for sure like from America. Okay, and so, but I feel that she has a different story. Like, how can I dive deep in her story? And she told me, like, you can only ask her, what's your ethnicity? And so now, if I see a person with the interesting cultural traits, I always ask, what is your ethnicity? I don't allow myself to ask anything else. But just to come back, I think you got my point. Just to come back to the paradox. So on the
Yeah.
one end, in the US, you have this amazing thing that everyone is really part of this country. Everyone is a citizen of this country, and it's so great. Like it seems there is not a real majority or minority group. I think there is a lot of diversity, and I think here everyone is. I mean, probably someone will not agree with me, but I feel like there are minorities, but are not as minor as in other countries. Like each minority here is major than minorities in other countries, and uh, and everyone is on the same level. Like you can call everyone American. That's the good side of things. The bad side of things, and like I'm discussing, I'm getting. I don't have like data points at hand, but like I can tell you right now, for me, it's a struggle to stay in the US. In the sense that I always feel that if something happens to my company, like if I get for some reasons laid off, I need to move out from countries in 60 days, even now that my university is sponsoring my visa. And the same will happen anytime in the future, even if I'm lucky to win the lottery.
It's an existential problem that for those of us that are U.S. citizens have not. I mean, it's I'm sitting here before you and I'm speaking with you, and this is like horrible. You know what I mean? It's like a nightmare, and like, and it's not something that I have ever had to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And it really drives home, the idea of, hey, there's some ways that we can change this system for the better.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything more existential than that. You know what I mean? For you, and I'm sorry that you're experiencing that.
Yeah. No, I mean, but I feel like in my situation, I feel like pretty okay, because I know my company, I mean, is in a very clear growth trajectory, and they're also working with with states of like with all the different states governments. So like it's a work that is really in partnership with like all the governmental and all the states entities in the US. So of course, of course we're talking about like public funds. So it's for most of the programs you're running across the different geographies in the US, in most of our markets. But let's say you're international and you want to take a leap of faith in a startup that you think they have a great product, they're pushing a great mission, and you don't I mean, of course, a startup has a very roller coaster journey. They have some highs, they have some lows. Like, even if you're doing so well in your job, even if you are pursuing a great mission, even if you're trying to do like your best, if by any reason your startup needs to like lay you off,
yeah, it's just one of the things that occasionally will happen, right?
Yes, you need to choose. You need to be very intentional about where you go,
right?
Because then you're very tied. Your life in the US is very tied to your employer,
right? It makes, from my perspective, it makes me take pause as to again, as a US citizen, is this current system working the best for the people who are here, who desire to be here, but also our economy, right? Is the law serving all of us here the best way that it possibly can be? I think we really have to ask those questions and get down to the detail level when it comes to immigration policy. Right?
Yeah.
Is it truly serving us well? And also, is it truly serving well-deserving human beings? That would be the two big questions to start with, in my estimation. Well, before we wrap up, first of all, thank you for sharing all of this with us. But let's talk a little bit about Generative for a moment. You're leading, playing program manager, I believe, is the specific position, right? For not one, but two generator accelerators in Indiana. Talk to us a little bit about that. How does one become the manager of not one, but two? That must keep you busy.
Yeah. So just to give a bit of background, like most program managers are like managing two programs. So it's pretty standard, and like we have amazing people working like in this company.
See, here you're not letting me have the opportunity to show how exceptional you are. See, you could have not said that at all.
I like there's just one point that like was exceptional about my year experience. Was not because of me, but was because how like things happen. But this year I had the chance to run 3 programs instead of 2 because like destiny. And so I was very lucky to, instead of like just coaching 10 founders, I had the chance of coaching 15 founders. So it was truly an amazing experience. I was in programs back to back. Of course, like I learned what meant to really prioritize the right actions, because of course in this year I needed to build my network of mentors, of investors to connect with the founders, and I need to build it on the fly while I was running programs and recruiting startups. So it was really an experience that really strengthened me a lot in my professional and also personal life. So I'm very appreciative of it. Just taking a step back, I mean, probably for the audience purposes, I'd like to give a snapshot about what Generative is doing, because I think it's a very well thought and intentional acceleration ecosystem.
Please do.
I always say like we are accelerating human beings, the drivers of the cars. Then we are accelerating building the cars. And then we are accelerating by putting fuel in the cars. So let me explain what are the drivers, what are the cars, and what is the fuel. So we have 3 programs called G Alpha, G Beta, and investment accelerators. So G Alpha is dealing with the driver. So basically, there are lots of aspiring entrepreneurs. They have just an idea. They don't know like the basic tools to approach the startup world. They are in the ideation phase, validation phase, so very very early stage. And so G Alpha is really like shaping the mind of the driver, giving to the driver the basic techniques, knowledges, and tools to like to understand what is a car, how to approach to build it. Then we have the car building, that is Gbeta. So basically, let's say we are fast tracking the finalization of this car building. We are literally building the car while driving. It's like a personalized metaphor of like building a plane while flies. And so I kind of I violate a bit the copyright. So sorry for like to the
we won't we won't
writer.
we'll cut that out if you
Okay.
want.
No, it's fine. I'm available to like I don't mind to be sued.
We'll pay the royalties.
Yeah, I will pay the yeah. Scott is gonna pay the royalty. Please bill Scott for the royalties. So that's the driver side of things. So we basically in this Gbeta program, we are kind of putting the driver in front of lots of mentors, lots of investors. We have a very specific structure of the program where we teach where we fine tune with the driver the business model, the financing milestones, the comparables, to really start to have a strategic mindset about the finalization of program market fit and also the fundraising strategy. So all the things that like make the driver able to drive the car in a more confident way, and also helps the driver to choose the path, the direction of where he wants to drive this car towards. So I would say brings a lot of awareness to the founder, and also the connections, different perspectives. We connect the founder minimum with 30 mentors, 25 investors for program. And I think perspectives brings awareness. And so that's the main point of Digibeta. And then we have S accelerators that, of course, keep building the car while driving, but also put fuel. That is $100K, $120K investment. And of course, you need, like most times, especially if you want to grow fast in a scalable manner, especially in a crowd market, that you need to build strong differentiators, could be through patentable technologies or like a strong go-to-market strategy. You need, of course, investments to double down the effort. And so that's what you do with investment accelerators.
Yeah, and it's no secret here at our show that we like the folks at Generator because for one, being that much of the work even I do personally outside of this podcast is really focused on economic development and either in rural areas or deindustrialized former mill towns. And the idea, essentially, organizations like Generator are leveling off the playing field or decentralizing the geographical map of where venture capital is placed, right? Which I think is really important, not just for the whole country, but even within venture capital. It's important for venture capital to make the most impact, that we're actually we're making this particular kind of financial instrument more accessible than just 3 or 4 large urban areas in the country. Because of course, talent is, talent can be found. You never know where you're going to find the next talent, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just really interesting for those reasons too, Well, listen, we applaud the work that you're doing out in Indiana.
Thank you so much.
Indianapolis is a great city.
Agreed.
It's a cool place to be, one of the best downtowns. For those listening in other parts of the country who have not been to Indianapolis, get yourself there sometime. It's a great downtown. It's got a great sort of nightlife happening these days. And it's been a few years since I've been there, but I was when I was in music merchandising, spent quite a bit of time annually in Indianapolis for many years, and sort of watched this latest iteration of redevelopment downtown. So that was pretty rewarding to watch as a person who's also interested in urban redevelopment.
Yeah, probably you mentioned, because of your background, you mentioned the nightlife. For me, like if I need to add also, my perspective is international. Like for sure, it's a very fresh, modern city. I've been like to New York, I've been to Detroit, I've been to San Francisco. At least urbanistically, it's very fresh. Like it seems that it's a city that it's just built. It's very new. Like it's you feel it's there is some modernity, some technology.
And there's less decay going on, only because most of the building, there's a big chunk of it that wasn't built 150 years ago and hasn't been cleaned up, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of my impression.
And something else, like the green is very, very great. There's a lot of green areas, parks. It's like the whole like traffic city with lots of smog. It's completely not here. We are very green, very, I would say, some sun. I mean, now it's December, and like I see sun in my room, and I cannot really see Scott. And yeah, and also I love it's very relaxing. I call it like pretty mindful.
Davide, I just want to say it's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
My true pleasure.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences, and maybe we'll have you back someday.
I'd love to. Thank you so much, Scott. It was a pleasure to have you. And yeah, maybe one day we're gonna also have you on the Young Outcast podcast. That is the podcast I'm running with my co-founder, so you can share your outcast time as young artist in your full artist journey.
Love it. I love it. And in addition to Davide mentioning his podcast just now, we'll have reference of it on our episode page so people can find you, Davide, in all the places that you are.
Thank you so much, Scott. We appreciate your time.
SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast is a production of M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com.